Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Thank you all. My question has to do with the Delaware River Basin. This time of year, we're always concerned about the flooding. I represent the Pike-Wayne County borders that flow all the way down through Philadelphia. And typically, a question is always asked about the snowpack coming down and the volume of ice. And of course, yesterday there was a rain event, so a number of us who actually represent river corridors are concerned. I know the Delaware Basin was working for a number of years on the flexible flow plan, and I was just wondering if you could give us an up-to-date description of that plan, and the issue being New York City maintaining very high levels of water in the reservoirs, which possibly could flood some of the people downstream when those reservoirs are full at capacity and we have a rain event.
Well, Representative, I'll start, but then I will ask Deputy Secretary Ongst to chime in. We are actively engaged with all of our partners on the Flexible Flow Initiative. We've been going through a series of one-year agreements, updating the one-year agreement to arrive at a situation where Pennsylvania's interests are protected. And we continue to work along those lines, understand the concerns about flooding, and very cognizant of the needs of downstream communities for water quantity, for water supply, where the salt line ends up. So we are paying very close attention and trying to figure out some ways to craft some longer-term solutions than just these kind of annual extensions of agreements. But I will ask Deputy Secretary Ongst if he can amplify a little bit.
Yeah. Representative, in addition to what the Secretary said, just need to point out that when we're talking about DRBC, we're not talking about flexible flow management plans. The flexible flow management plan is actually the result of a group called the Decree Parties and the 1954 Supreme Court consent decree that dealt with the releases from the New York City reservoirs in order to maintain flows in the Delaware Basin. So DRBC is this separate compact that was created in 1961 for other reasons. Now, they are linked, but they are separate entities. For example, the decree parties include the city of New York, whereas DRBC does not. So the current flexible flow management plan is set to expire in May of this year, and we are working very closely with the other states and the city of New York to try to come to some agreement on what a new plan would look like. As right now, we're making progress. We're not there yet.
So we're taking care of New York City. Are they contributing to the compact as well? I mean, historically, when we look at the payments made to the compact, Pennsylvania has always made our payment. But on page, 47 of your summary here, there's Pennsylvania payments, and then there's a bunch of zeros for the federal government. There's other funds that are all zeros. Some of my constituents wonder why we're always consistently making a payment to this compact. We get one vote in the compact, and no one else seems to make a payment. So there seems to be a little discrepancy as far as if you have a vote, you should, or we should, as a compact, all make payments to this entity. But unfortunately, historically, Pennsylvania is one of the few that really makes historical payments on time that are this substantial. And this year, we're giving them a $316 million increase.
Right. I believe, Representative, you're talking about the DRBC. Again, that's different from flexible flow. DRBC is a completely separate entity. And
yes, but if New York City is controlling our water flow along the Delaware River, New York City should be helping pay to the DRBC, whether it's connected or not. Maybe it's not flexible flow, but if it's the Delaware River Basin, and you're telling me that we're controlled by a compact or some decree that was set up by this New York City, well, then New York City should be contributing to this compact, and they're not.
Well, what I will say on the DRBC is obviously in the budget, the governor has increased DRBC's line item by about 72%. The state's payment, the Commonwealth's payment to DRBC was cut $500,000 last year. And the governor has restored funding to that agency because of its importance to the downstream communities, supplying water to millions of Pennsylvanians. The governor recognizes the important work that DRBC does and has restored funding to the agency. It provides an essential function for Pennsylvania.
I think my constituents would be happy with that explanation, but for years now, we have not received a vote during this time of openness and transparency, we have not received a vote on whether the draft regulations for drilling will be accepted by the DRBC or not. I think if we're putting our taxpayer dollars in up to the tune of $1 million a year, they would at least like to see the New Yorks, the New Jerseys, New York Cities, Delawares, Pennsylvanias, and the Army Corps of Engineers come out and put a vote down, yay or nay, either they're going to drill or not. Now, I guess we can assume that New York would be a nay, because that's the stance that they've taken overall for their state, and that's fine. But I think we owe it to my constituents who would like to drill for natural gas that we stop, just bring it up for a vote. Let's bring it up for a vote, and let's see what the entities that support it and not, and then we can work from there. I mean, bottom line is that the media reports last 2 weeks ago had, I think, double-digit towns in New York State looking to secede from New York State to join Pennsylvania so they could drill for natural gas. They feel like they're sitting underneath a resource that they'd like to harvest. I think we need to probably, discuss with those different, I think there were 4 counties and numerous towns, and I can't remember the number of towns, but it was double-digit towns. I think we need to sit down with those individuals and say, hey, look, it might be fine if you're in the SRBC or the Susquehanna or in that direction, but if you're in the DRBC, you're still in the DRBC, even if you join the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you're not going to be able to harvest that resource. So, my constituents are at a point, if we're going to give $1 million a year to this entity, at least let's put up a vote, and whether it falls, it falls, or if it passes, it passes, but that's what they'd like to see.
And I understand that position, Representative. The governor, as you know, both as a candidate and since taking office, has expressed his support for a continuation of the moratorium on drilling in the Delaware River Basin. And as long as the commissioners are still doing their due diligence, until they are satisfied with the science and the format and content of their regulations, the governor will support their maintenance of the moratorium.
It's just interesting how in one area of the Commonwealth we have gas drilling, in one area of the Commonwealth we do not. So I guess maybe, I don't understand it, but thank you for your explanation.